Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Shape Builder tool in Adobe Illustrator. Before we begin, I've already created a document with a number of different shapes compiled together to create out a couple various images. We're going to be starting out on the top left side where we have the two circles overlapping. We'll move over to this face and then over to the cloud shape to understand some basics of how the Shape Builder can be consolidated and be more efficient. And then we'll get into something more comprehensive with the multiple circles that we see down in the bottom portion. Finally, we will explore a couple other tools getting into using the alignment panel, as well as understanding how to duplicate objects, and then putting it all together into creating out something a little bit more identifiable. But to begin with, we're going to use our selection tool to select out the two circles on the top left side. Understand that as I move my cursor over top of these two circles, I'm not able to select on the interior of these shapes. Currently, there is no fill color happening on these objects, and we'll talk about how to fill those objects in with the Shape Builder momentarily. But just understand that currently there is no color inside, there is no fill, so they are transparent, and I need to either select on the outlines, where I can hold down Shift to select out multiple pieces, or I can click and drag from an open space over top of the two objects that I want. And now that they are selected, now we can get into modification. But with these selected, we're able to use our Shape Builder tool. The Shape Builder tool is located on the left side navigation. And as we can see in the sample, if I click and drag through the objects, they can combine into one shape. Or there are many different ways to use the Shape Builder to customize shapes however you prefer. But understand I do have the layout in which if I went up to Window, I can set up my controls or my toolbars. Right now I currently have the Advanced tool set in which it has the double column, allowing me more tools that I can work with. And I have my workspace set up to Essentials Classic. I find this to be a lot more convenient because I have a number of tools on the right side navigation and being able to modify certain elements of my appearance throughout the design a lot more efficiently. But again, I'm going to click and drag over the two objects on the left side. And clicking on the Shape Builder tool, the icon that looks like two little circles with a dotted line going through and a white arrow cursor, I click on this so that I can be able to modify the shapes. Before I do any type of clicking or dragging through the objects, I just want to hover over top. And I can see that hovering over top, it allows me to see how these objects are going to be selected or sectioned off, that I can either make them individual shapes or combine them into one singular shape. If I move over to other objects, I cannot select or see any of this gray area. The objects must be selected first before you can use them with the Shape Builder. But having them selected, I am going to zoom in, which I can hit Command or Control plus, so that this becomes the center of my frame. If we wanted to get into combining out shapes, the first and most basic way is clicking and dragging from one section to the next and clicking and dragging through until all are highlighted with this gray overlay. And when I release, they combine into one singular shape. No matter what you do, this is now one solid shape. Easily, we can always hit Command or Control Z to step back. But the functionality of the Shape Builder is about the person's control, being able to decide if you want to have a full object or separate pieces out individually. And with the Shape Builder, if I wanted to click and drag only into two of the three pieces, as I can see that they're highlighted gray, when I release, they combine into one singular circle. That leaves the separation with this crescent moon on the top right side as its own individual piece. So if I were to go over to my selection tool, the black arrow, I can click and drag from the outline, and we can see that they are now separated pieces. But I'm going to hit Control Z to step back, or Command Z. So I get back to having my two solid circles, or my two circles that are overlapping. Again, with the Shape Builder, the objects must be selected, but we're going to take a look at understanding how we can actually fill in these objects so that we're not dealing with the transparency in between the objects. So over on the left side navigation, we're going to have the object selected. We're going to click on the Shape Builder tool. And with the Shape Builder tool selected, we can now get into changing out the foreground or fill color. I'm going to double click on this transparent box on the bottom left, and I can choose any color that I want to use from my color picker. When I click OK, nothing has happened to the objects, but we do have this fill presenting inside of this area. With the shape builder, if I move my cursor over to an object and I click on it, it automatically fills in with that fill and that stroke. So we're getting that black outline, but having that blue area inside. And I can do this for another piece. Again, just click on it and it automatically gets filled in with that color. Or if you want to change up the color, you can adjust to whatever color preference you like. I'm going to click inside of the object, and now we have an overlay of where these two meet, creating 3 different shapes. If I were to click on the selection tool, the black arrow, I can click and drag to separate all 3 pieces so that they are all individual elements. But just understand, it's very convenient that we can use the shape builder to divide up shapes, create out unique and different shapes very easily just with the click of a button. But I'm going to step back and get back to the area. Again, right now I currently don't have a fill color, but again, we can change out the color at any point. With the shape builder, until we click inside the object, there is no fill, but we can see that we can click in each piece and it gets filled in. If I want to change the color after having applied a color, it's very easy to, again, just go back in, click on those pieces to recreate out that shape. But we don't always have to just combine or create shapes. We can also get into subtracting shapes. With the object selected, we're going to go over to the shape builder. And this time, if you notice, my cursor has a black arrow with a little plus sign appearing underneath of it. If you hold down Alt or Option, Alt on a PC, Option on a Mac, you'll see a minus symbol appear. This minus symbol means that we're going to now subtract shapes if we click and drag over them. So again, if I highlight, just move my cursor over top, we get that gray area. But if I click and drag through pieces, whatever pieces I drag through will eliminate from the selection, leaving us with whatever was not touched. If I want to separate just the middle piece, again, I can hold down Alt or Option, click inside, and now we have 2 crescent moon shapes that I can individually move and separate how I'd like. Or if you want to erase out the entirety of these objects, holding down Alt and dragging through all 3, it eliminates out the objects entirely. But again, I can step back, Command or Control Z. Whatever color combinations you use, that is up to you. For myself, I'm going to look to just fill out the object so I have 3 different colors, and then we're going to separate them so that we can see that we have modified the shapes into unique elements. Now that we've completed out this one, we're going to move over to our face. With the face, we're going to look to select out all the pieces of the objects. And we're going to click on the shape builder to begin creating one unique element without any overlapping lines that get a little bit overwhelming. We want to break it down into the simplest form. So currently I do not have any fill on my foreground, but I'm going to look to pick out a skin tone. You can have fun with it, be expressive, pick out any color you like. But double clicking on the fill color, I get the color picker. And if I want to start combining shapes, I'm going to start probably with the ear and click and drag into the pieces so that it connects into the top of the face. When I release, we get that pink color happening inside. If I want to combine the top to the bottom, just click and drag through. And we're also going to add in the bottom portion of the overlapping circles down towards the mouth area. When I click and drag through, we're left with one solid piece that represents the facial feature. We will break down the nose as a separate element as well as the eyes, but just for you to comprehend and see how it can be broken down very easily. You notice that I did it in separate selections where I focused on the top and the bottom. You can also do it all in one as well. If I click and drag through these pieces, as long as I don't let go and I drag through the pieces that I want, when I do release, they will appear inside of that space. If I decide that I want to change the color at any point, I'm going to go lighter with a color. Whatever color I want to go with, we can see how it's going to apply. Now we're going to into the nose element. I'm going to change up the color just a little bit to bring out some variation of color. But I would imagine that this is a eyeball, and this is going to be appearing in front of the nose. The eyeball on the right side for us is going to be appearing behind the nose. So that means I'm going to click and drag through the pieces of the nose, but not selecting over this left eye. When I release, make sure you notice all the little details. I want to make sure that I don't miss any elements, so I can see that there is a little triangle on this right side. I'm going to click and drag from the nose to make sure that this triangle also gets added into the nose portion. Now that we have the nose filled in, we're going to look to change out our color for the fill. I'm just going to put it to white to represent the whites of our eyes. And clicking, dragging through the pieces, I can click and drag from the main area into the smaller sections. Again, I'm going to have this eye appearing in front of the other eye and on top of the nose. So when I click and drag through, it combines into one shape. We'll do this as well for the right eye to us, left eye of the character, but we're going to click and drag through the pieces so that it becomes one shape. So currently they are filled with white, and we can look to add in other colors depending on whatever you want to do for his flat top looking haircut or filling in the mouth. It is up to you to choose out the colors of your choice. But I click inside the object and it automatically fills in that area. For the mouth, I'll give it more of a pinkish red tongue, and then give it a darker portion of the mouth so we can see a separation between the two. Finally, if you are a little bit creeped out by the eyes not having pupils, I'd recommend just click on the ellipse tool to draw out the shapes. I can hold down shift to draw out a perfect circle. I'm going to fill this in with black. And then I can hold down Alt to click and drag this pupil over to the other side so that we have two pupils, one on each eye. If you want little details or make this stand out a little bit more, I'm also going to put in small little shines over top of the pupil so it's not just a flat black circle. I can fill it in with white. And if you decide that you want to use the shape builder to cut out this little highlight, I can always use the shape builder with the two objects selected. Hold down Alt, click and drag to eliminate out that section on the pupil. So if I wanted to take this out and just use this one again, I can hold down Alt, click and drag so that now I have that appearing on both eyes. But take your time, look to recreate the shape, get used to the shape builder. It does take some time to get used to, and we can see how we can break it down. Next, we're going to look at these circles and understand how we can break these down. We have the ability to use the Pathfinder as another alternative for the shape builder, for combining shapes. The shape builder has a lot of its own abilities and ways of using it, and it's really the artist's opinion on what they prefer. For myself, I like the shape builder, but it's also important to understand how the Pathfinder works and knowing how to break it down. If I take a look at my right side navigation, I can click on my Pathfinder icon. If you do not see the Pathfinder icon, you can go up to Window and alphabetical order, click on Pathfinder. Currently, these objects are filled with white, but just so we can see these a little bit more clearly and see the difference, I'm going to fill them in with a color. Right now, there are a number of circles all piled on top of each other. If I were to go through the Pathfinder, I can go through Unite, click on it, it combines into one. Very simple. But the problem with the Pathfinder is that when you're dealing with multiple shapes, I'm going to go back to where I started, Command or Control Z. If you have multiple shapes, you're not necessarily having the ability to focus on what you want to cut out versus what you don't. So if I click on minus front, it only keeps what was on the back of my image. So if I hit Control Z, I know that this circle over on the left was the first circle I drew and the last behind the rest of these smaller circles. So again, when I click minus front, everything that was over top of this was now deleted out and leaving us just with this piece. That may not be what I want. So the shape builder gives you a little bit more control overall of how it works. So I'm going to step back, Command or Control Z. If I look at the intersect, when I click on the intersect, this doesn't even work. It's too many shapes to be understanding how to break it down. So just be careful. The Pathfinder has its limitations. What is pretty cool is when you do the exclude, it creates this overlapping cutout of shapes, which is very unique, but it all depends on what you're really trying to create. So just understand that there are benefits, but it may not necessarily be what you're trying to do. So I'll step back again, Command or Control Z. Going through the other options, the divide breaks these down into individual pieces, in which I would have to select on the isolation mode to separate these pieces out. Again, that can be complicated and hard to understand when you're getting into just learning the basics of Illustrator. Trim gets into, again, cutting out the highlights, and I would have to go into isolation mode to select out pieces and separate them out. Again, it's not necessarily giving me a comprehensive way of breaking down shapes or cutting out shapes manually or how I might prefer. But I'll step back again. We have merge, which is similar to unite. If I go into isolation mode, it is still one single shape. We have crop, which will crop based on the top image. Whatever was sitting behind that top image will be cropped inside of that selection. Not necessarily what you probably want to be doing, but it's just a matter of what's your preference for the shapes. Outline will just give us the outlines. You can see that it's just leaving us the outlines, which isn't really helping my design overall, and just leaving us with a bunch of lines. And finally, the minus back, which should be brought up to the shape modes section. With minus back, when I click on it, it will cut out the back and leave the top subject or object. So just the opposite of minus front. The top object is left there while the rest is cut out. So this may not be your preference. So I usually recommend using the shape builder and understanding that we can do a lot more things with a lot better control. The first thing to understand is that holding down Alt or Option again, you can click and drag through pieces to eliminate it and draw out specifically what you want to cut out. If I click on individual pieces, they'll be cut out and separated from the rest of the objects. Whatever I click on will be eliminated because I'm holding down Alt or Option. But I'm going to step back. Understand that you can also combine into certain shapes that you want to click and drag through and not include the pieces that you don't. So if I click on this piece, I can get it separate while still leaving the circles over on the right. But why we're taking a look at these shapes is that we can also use the shape builder to efficiently click and drag over these objects and combine them into one a lot more efficiently. Rather than clicking and dragging, trying to get every single element and maybe missing a piece where you get left with chunks inside, you can hold down Shift on your keyboard, click and drag over top of the entire space, like it's selecting over the area. You see this little bounding box appear. So when I let go, it combines all the things that were selected in that area to be part of one. The same thing if I hold down Alt and Shift. I can subtract pieces so that everything gets eliminated. So this is where you have to understand and comprehend that the shape builder has its positives. It's just a matter of understanding what's the best use and how it can differentiate from the Pathfinder. So ultimately, we're just going to leave out with one solid object. I'm going to hold down Shift, click and drag over all of them. Instead of leaving this with a flat orangish brown color, we're going to change this into a softer cloud-like gradient. If I want to do a light blue color, first I'll put in a light blue. Click and drag on my options and pick out from the color picker. And I'm going to go over to my gradient tool, the gradient tool on the right side navigation. I can see with the object selected this blue color appear in the gradient. I'm going to click and drag this onto my gradient slider, and now I have white to blue to this black color. I don't like the black overwhelming the rest of the design, so if I want to get rid of it, I can click and drag it downward, eliminating it out, or I can select on it and hit the trash can icon, deleting the stop out. Finally, if you do want to adjust the gradient in any way, I'm going to have the gradient travel from top to bottom rather than left to right. I'm going to click on the gradient tool on the left side navigation and click and drag from top to bottom. Now we get this very smooth transition from the light color of the cloud down to the darker blue color. We zoom out just so we can see the progress that we've made in using the shape builder. Now we have a more complex image. And this idea is that we can have all these different circles, but it's a matter of understanding what you're trying to create. With the circles that we have currently, we're going to look to create out more of a flame shape. So I'm going to look to select out all the circles that are here. And I'm going to go over to my shape builder. With my shape builder, I'm going to look to keep 4 flames on the top of this circle while taking out all the unnecessary pieces. So I'm going to start by holding down Alt or Option, click and drag through the pieces that I want to eliminate. If you miss a piece, you can still go over top of it to eliminate from the selection. On the top portion, I'm going to eliminate out the gaps in between the 2 flames. I would recommend you zoom in, take a closer look, and make sure that you're not missing any pieces. I can see that there is a little overlap, which I can hold down Alt and click and drag through these pieces as well. I'll zoom out again and we'll focus on the right side. Again, hold down Alt or Option, click and drag through the pieces that aren't necessary. If you miss any pieces, there are a couple smaller little triangles that you may want to get. Hold down Alt, click and drag through. Finally, over on the right side on the top, we're going to leave the spikes or the flame pieces. But we're ultimately trying to get this 4 flame pronged fire as one cohesive piece. Just like we did with the cloud shape, we can take a look at selecting out objects to make them all part of one shape. We're going to leave the interior circle separate as its own eventual color. But if I want to combine all these little pieces that make up the flames on the top portion, as well as the main body of this fireball, I'm going to go with the shape builder and I'm going to hold down Shift and I can click and drag over all the pieces that I want. And when I release, they all combine into one single shape. I do have a couple areas that I might have missed, and I can hold down Shift again, click and drag so that they get added into the selection. One little area that I notice is that there is an overlap on the interior circle. And again, I can click and drag inside so I can add it into the interior circle. So I have the interior, that's one piece, and then the outer portion that has the flames extending from the top. Rather than leaving this as a flat color, we're going to change this out to a gradient, so more of a fireball. I can either start with the interior circle or go on the outside. Both of them are currently transparent. If you do want to start out with a standard color, we'll just put it into an orange so we can see everything. I'm going to click on the interior circle and we're going to go over to our gradient panel again. This time, if I want to modify, I can look at the samples. Maybe there might be a default gradient that I can use. Or I can click and drag this orange color into the middle of my gradient slider. I don't want to have blue for this, so I can click and drag this off or select on the blue and hit the trash can, deleting out that stop. I'm going to slide the orange over on the right and change this white color, double clicking on the color stop. I'm going to make this a yellow color. I can use the gradient on the left side to click and drag down, having the gradient flow from lighter to darker. And now we'll look to select and change out the exterior of the object. To apply this gradient that we currently already did, I can use the eyedropper tool with the object selected. I can click on the sample of the color I want. And if I want to modify this color, I want to make sure that it is different and unique. Maybe instead of dragging from top to bottom, I drag from bottom to top. So we're getting a variation of light to dark in the opposite manner, or change the color entirely. I'm going to add in a color stop on the right side of the gradient slider, and we'll make this a little bit more red. And again, I can adjust the gradient as I see fit to create out my own look and feel. But to each their own, and just understanding how to make these one singular shape, turning it into something a little bit more unique. If you wanted to eliminate out the stroke entirely, I could select on both objects, click on the black stroke and hit the none, and now we just have the flame by itself. Now that we have these four shapes all created out, we'll go over to our lines that we currently have. These lines are not distributed correctly and not aligned, and that's two things that we want to look to fix. We're not using the shape builder for this portion, but we will at the end. I'm going to look to select out all the lines. I can click and drag from the open space over top of them, or if you're impatient, you're welcome to hold down Shift and click on each individual one, which can get a little bit annoying. But I'm going to click and drag over all the pieces, and we're going to look to use what is known as our align panel. With the Essentials Classic layout, we do have the align panel appearing on the top navigation, but I usually don't like to use this because there's two separate categories in the align panel. We have the alignment portion and the distribute portion, and without knowing them offhand, you may be confused about which ones do what. So I would recommend get the alignment panel. If you don't see it over on the right side navigation, it looks like two rectangles with a bar aligning them on the left side. If I click on this, I can see the sample. If you do not see this icon, we can go up to Window and align in alphabetical order underneath the window. But with these lines selected, we're going to take a look, and we have the align objects and distribute objects. We can always get into custom spacing as well, but we don't need to worry about it for the basics. First, we're taking a look at the align objects. Currently, all these lines are exactly the same length, so it does not necessarily matter which one I choose. All of the three options, horizontal line left, horizontal line center, or line right, they're all going to align these lines evenly down the area selected right in the middle. So when I click on it, whichever one I click on, they're going to be in the same exact place. If they were different lengths, let me break them up. We have a couple shorter lines now. Because these lines are shorter, yes, they'll align over on the left and maintain the left alignment over here. But if I do the line right, they jump over to the other side. Or if I do the line center, you'll get them exactly centered in the middle of the selected area. But just understand that we're actually looking to having these completely aligned correctly, so I can step back with what we've started with. I'm going to select out over all the lines, and again, just align center, making sure that they stay aligned correctly. But there is still an issue that they're not distributed evenly. There's bigger gaps in between certain sections, and we're not going to be using the align section for this, but we'll eventually use the distribute objects. The reason why we don't use the align objects, if I go over to, say, the vertical align center, which you might think might be correct, since we've just used this portion of the panel, if I click on this, this is actually going to combine all those shapes into one singular section. And that just hides all the different lines that we had created. So I'll step back, Command or Control Z. With the distribute objects, this allows us to align things evenly, distribute so that they have the same spacing throughout. So when I click on the vertical spacing, or the vertical align center, we get them distributed evenly so that they have the same exact spacing for each section. So when I click off, they're a lot more professionally aligned, and it makes things a lot more efficient. The other way of drawing out lines and maintaining consistency in the size, we're going to click on the pen tool in the left side navigation. Third tool left side, I'm going to look to click a point, move my cursor down, and I'm going to hold shift to make sure that I get a perfectly vertical line. So when I click, it's going to leave us just a point A to point B. And to end this line, I can just hit escape on my keyboard. So we have the vertical line by itself. When it does come into aligning things, I always recommend that you have your smart guides on. If you do not have your smart guides on, you can go up to view at the top navigation and click on smart guides. This just makes sure that things are going to stay evenly distributed. And you'll start to see these pink little elements that are going to identify and show that we are aligning things correctly. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, and I'm going to click and drag this line to the right. Again, we can see this pink line identifying that we're keeping this exactly even, but you can also hold down Shift on your keyboard to make sure that we create a duplicate that's evenly aligned top and bottom with the object. Once you have this duplicate created, a shortcut key for duplicating out multiple lines, maintaining the same exact placement, is hitting Command or Control D. So once I have a duplicate, when I hit Command or Control D, it puts more duplicates right beside the rest of that shape. So I'm just continuing to hit Control or Command D, and it makes out that same idea, creating out multiple duplicates, keeping everything aligned. If you do not have things aligned, and if I have a copy, when I make a duplicate and I click and drag, if I accidentally lower this below the first object, when I do the Command or Control D, it's actually going to create and maintain that same drop of the line so that they're not going to be evenly distributed. But I could always click and drag over all the lines and then go over to my alignment panel and look to align with a vertical center so that they're evenly distributed. But we have these lines now combined. Now we want to take the idea of the shape builder and the duplicate and put them together into one method. So what we're going to do is look to draw out a vertical triangle towards this bottom right side of the document. I go over to my rectangle tool. I'm going to click and drag to create out the rectangle. Then we're going to go over to our polygon tool. And with the polygon, we're going to draw out a triangle shape. Right now we're seeing a hexagon shape. But if I want to reduce the number of sides, I can hit the down arrow on my keyboard so that we get this triangular shape. You can always up or change the number of sides of the object, but we want to get down to 3 sides. And I also want to get a flat bottom. So to get a flat bottom, I want to hold down Shift so that we get that flat element of the triangle facing down on the bottom portion of that design. So I want to release with my mouse first, and then I can release with Shift. And we're going to look to place our triangle right on the top edge, perfectly aligned to our rectangle that we already created. If I zoom in, I want to make sure that I get things currently aligned. So I'm going to make sure that the left corner of my triangle and the left corner of my top of my triangle are going to align up perfectly. And we're going to modify it so it looks like almost a pencil shape or a crayon shape. But we want to combine these two objects into one singular object. If there's a gap between the objects, even if it's very subtle, if I try to use the shape builder tool to combine these, yes, I do get the selection of the objects both being selected, but we'll still see the separation of the objects. We have to make sure that the objects are maintaining alignment and are perfectly touching at the top edge. That's again where the smart guides are very useful to have. With these two objects, I'm going to click and drag over both. I can go over to my shape builder, and now because I've aligned them touching on the top portion, when I click and drag through, that combines into one singular shape. With this one single shape, I'm going to look to create a duplicate. I can hold down Alt, click and drag to the right, and I'm going to leave a little bit of space in between. And rather than having to do this over and over again, holding down Alt or Option, I'm going to hit Command or Control D, creating out multiple duplicates of that same shape. That's how easy it is to create out these types of shapes. And if I were to put two rectangles, one running on the top portion and one running on the bottom portion, you could always just use the same shape twice. When I put those together, we have what looks like a fence. So it's just a matter of how you use tools that can combine into creating something a little bit more unique or something more identifiable. Obviously with this, we're trying to create out a fence shape. And it's very easy once you start to learn the tools a little bit easier. So I hope you enjoyed this demo tutorial. Please come back and I will see you again soon. Have a good day.